With the announcement of Total War Warhammer 3, we have a lot to talk about, a lot of different things to discuss and to speculate. But one of the big things I want to open up with, at least as far as my continuum of speculation and discussion, is one of the items that was discussed in the FAQ regarding Age of Sigmar and End Times models. Now, I know a lot of people, when they hear the word End Times, they shrink back. And when they hear the word Age of Sigmar, they screech. And I understand how you feel about that. So in this video today, we're going to talk about some of the stuff that we saw in that trailer that just came out this last week, the CG trailer. Then I'm going to go through the 8th edition army book for the Chaos Daemons and discuss some of the models that were actually updated in the End Times that we maybe think were updated in 8th edition. They weren't actually updated in that same kind of timeline that we all think that they were. And then I'm going to talk about how I really think this is a strong, good move. So I'm going to put some chapters in the timeline below where you can jump to individual portions. So for example, I'm going to be talking about the FAQ first. We're going to go over the question that Creative Assembly answered or asked and answered for themselves. We're going to go through some stills from the CG trailer and how I think that those correlate to Age of Sigmar or End Times models. And then I'm going to show you guys some comparison of 6th and 8th edition models to their End Times or Age of Sigmar counterparts. And then I'm going to conclude it all with a, hey, this is why I think this is a good idea. So navigate to the things as you so wish. And if you have not yet picked up or pre-ordered Total War Warhammer 3, I have a link to my Nexus site that you can go ahead and do so. Please, by all means, go through Steam or Epic if it helps you out and is easier for you. But this will give you a Steam key, and Nexus has a direct partnership with the developer. So they get the key right from them and hand it to you. And I get a pretty sizable commission. This weekend, they're actually giving 100% of that margin to all content creators who use it. So it's a really awesome platform and it really helps out the channel. But let's dive in on how I think that Age of Sigmar and End Times is really going to benefit Total War Warhammer 3. So to start out, we'll go into the basis for our argument, and it is the FAQ that says, is Total War Warhammer 3 going to be set during the End Times and feature stuff from Age of Sigmar? No, as with the Total War Warhammer 1 and 2, Total War Warhammer 3 is set around the reign of Karl Franz. Our primary source is Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition, although we have and will continue to use older editions for inspiration where appropriate. So let me just start out here by saying I don't think that they're talking about putting an End Times narrative and Age of Sigmar narrative. I think that that's what this is primarily answering. But when we start to go through some of the CG stuff, which we're going to go into, we can see that they're already borrowing from End Times and Age of Sigmar as inspiration for the, I call them models, but for the units within the game. And again, I'm totally fine with that. I think that this is a really sharp and good idea. I've made the distinction in the announced video, and I did it during the stream that we did just a day ago, talking about some of the facets of Warhammer 3. But I think that kind of making this statement almost kind of shoehorns you into 8th edition or below and RPG, which is kind of damning. And we're going to go through some of these model comparisons and differences and why I think it's not the best call. And again, I'm not hating on Creative Assembly for that. I'm just saying that Age of Sigmar and End Times do have things that are worth pulling from. And I will also make this stipulation. The only things that are worth pulling from are Chaos, because they being Games Workshop, has always created Chaos as this entity that lives in all of its realms, right? In 40K and in Age of Sigmar and in Fantasy and probably in Old World. And they will probably use the same models just like they always have for years. So I think that this only really applies to Chaos Daemons and Warriors of Chaos and maybe Beastmen, because we've already seen on the Warhammer community site that they've just shown new Beastmen units that are influenced by Slaanesh. So it can apply there, but this could never really apply to Kislev unless we're talking about Old World Kislev influencing Total War Warhammer 3. This could never really apply to Empire because Empire doesn't really exist in Age of Sigmar outside of the cities of whatever the hell. And I am not by any stretch of the imagination saying that we need the Stormcast Eternals in Total War Warhammer 3. Never ever will I say such a disgusting thing. Give it its own game if you have to, but I do not think that that needs to be said here. But I just want to make the distinction so that we're on the same page. I'm talking about the inspiration for the Chaos Daemons. So let's now jump into some CG stills and talk about those as already nodding into End Times and Age of Sigmar. Starting with the Keeper of Secrets, we can see this very different visage than what we get from the 4th edition, the Keeper of Secrets, which looks terrible, and the 6th edition Keeper of Secrets, which just has a different head. In fact, that's what they did for the latter editions of the Greater Demons, is they just kind of swapped out the heads for them and said, oh, we updated the model. You barely did that. So here is the Keeper of Secrets, the close-up, and I'm going to show you, we're going to jump here, and I apologize for this being low tech, but I think this kind of served the way I want to talk about this, and allows me to jump back and forth a little bit easier. But this is the old 8th edition. This is in the 8th edition army book for Chaos Daemons. That's the 8th edition Keeper of Secrets, and it looks just not cool. Now, if I jump right here, you can see the newest Keeper of Secrets, which has just recently been released in the Slaanesh line for Age of Sigmar. And if you look at this little guy right here, that's like the exact same portion of the face that we see in the CG trailer. And I think this is a nice, strong, positive move, because Slaanesh doesn't have the most up-to-date models. It's not like Khorne, which we're going to primarily go through. And this gives us a whole new range of really awesome, badass looking models that also fall into the PEGI 16 or T14 rating that Creative Assembly is pursuing. There's a whole bunch of different like marketing regulations between a teen and a mature game in the UK. And I don't really know all the nuance of it. But this is the approach that Games Workshop has taken. And they're probably going to want that representation mirrored down into Total War Warhammer 3. And I think that this is a really strong move without making Slaanesh too edgy or just filled with boobs all over the place unnecessarily. And now as we jump a little bit forward here, we can see the Bloodthirster. Now, I had originally thought this was the Bloodthirster from Age of Sigmar. It's not. I forgot that they did the new models in End Times, because the end portion of End Times is kind of a blur, especially for people that actually took part in it. They're like, oh God, this is miserable. And I think that is what is so important here. And kind of one of the big distinctions I'm trying to make is that 8th edition fantasy, End Times, and the beginning of Age of Sigmar, that timeline kind of blurs, especially if you were playing during all that. And it's kind of hard to remember that, okay, all the brand new badass looking Nurgle models, a lot of those came in End Times. They did not come with 8th edition actual. Like the Great Unclean one was the terrible Great Unclean one until End Times. So I think pulling from End Times and from Age of Sigmar is not a bad call when it comes to the inspiration for Chaos Daemons. We jump here. This is the 4th, 5th edition Bloodthirster. As you can see, kind of weird. And then we jump forward a little bit. Don't mind the pixels on this, but that is the most recent Bloodthirster prior to this one, the brand new one. And this guy is rock hard Rock Johnson, Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Like, this guy is badass. I mean, he's just rippling with muscle. You can see this dude. I mean, it's just perfect for me. So now that we've kind of go over some of these CG stills, let's jump into some comparisons from 8th edition to End Times or Age of Sigmar models. We'll primarily start with the Khorne line, because the Khorne line got the biggest update and refresh when it came to Age of Sigmar. And then we're going to jump into a little bit of Tzeentch, and I'm going to conclude with another little curveball from Nurgle. And we'll start out here with the Fleshhounds of Khorne. And these aren't terrible models. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with them. But when I compare them to the Age of Sigmar variant, I see just something that looks terrifying. That's going to ask me for the password because it's from Ghostbusters. Like, these guys look so big and so chunky and so scary. And on top of it, the Fleshhounds had a named character, Karanak, K-A-R-A-N-A-K, something like that. And this guy has a little bit of a dinosaur theme going to him, and he's a particularly old model. I think this one's from like 5th or 6th edition, and they just never really updated it, except for Age of Sigmar. And he looks just gnarly. So hopefully you're kind of with me on this trend here, where they're starting to make a really good amount of headway on these models that actually look very polished. They look really cool. They've got a ton of character. Now, it's not to say that you can't have the old models having character, right? We're taking a look at static poses on plastic with paint on them. So it is a little bit of a cheating notion to say there's no way it could possibly look as cool as this model, which looks 10 times cooler. I mean, that is kind of cheating the fact that we're going to be seeing this in 3D and as a moving, breathing piece of digital whatever. So it's not to say that you can't make those old models look badass, but when you have just a whole better subset of models to pull from, why not do that? And it is also more representative of the stance Games Workshop takes on that particular portion of the lore. There's nothing that says that a Chaos Demon Fleshhound has to look exactly like this. That's kind of the chaos of chaos, is that it is a constantly shifting and changing amalgamation of just disgusting crap. I think when you take a look at stuff like Lothern Seaguard, they have to have a pretty set look because, you know, that's a very regimented standard for the High Elves. Or we take a look at something like the Vampire Counts or any of the other races who have already had this kind of preset look to them without getting a updated refresh look. And I'm pretty sure that if they were to say, hey, we're going to be doing a brand new Chaos Dwarf army for Age of Sigmar, just call it the Dawizar, for example, then if they did new models for that prior to Warhammer 3, my brain would immediately latch on to that new look, especially because it's going to be a polished, sharp, and good look. I would say, hey, go ahead and just put those into the game. As long as you have that somewhat similar aesthetic with like the Lamassu and all the really cool stuff from Chaos Dwarf, I don't see a problem with getting the new and sharper and polished look. I've said that like those 3 terms like 4 times now. Let's go on here with the Skull Taker. And Skull Taker, again, a super old model. And here's a really good example of a model that keeps the general vibe and feel of the previous editions and just makes it look better. Here is the one from Age of Sigmar. Like, that guy looks great. And he looks essentially the same, more dynamic pose, way more trembling in his Anavar load in with his steroids, as you can tell from those massive quads, definitely of 38 inches. And he's got a cooler sword, but look, his horns are the same. He's holding up this flaming skull with the spine attached to it. His cloak looks better and more dynamic. So I don't think that pulling from Age of Sigmar End Times in these more developed looks is a bad thing. Jump over here. Now, this is an example of something that came from 8th edition and carried into Age of Sigmar. The Skull Cannons and the Skull Taker Chariot, I think it's what it's called. Those two, the Chariot and the Cannon, came out in 8th edition. They were brand new models. They kept them as is. So we will probably see this represented for Khorne in Total War Warhammer 3 as it was in 8th edition, and that's totally fine. Another good example would be the massive little bloat drones, the flying little disgusting creatures from Nurgle. Those had a fresh new model update in 8th edition, not in End Times. So slap them on in. Let's do it. Now, one thing though that is purely Age of Sigmar are some of their models like these guys, the Blood Reapers. Now, these are essentially just the base units for the Blades of Khorne faction from Age of Sigmar. And I still think that they could have a place in Total War Warhammer 3 without being Age of Sigmar units. Like, hey, this is just a band of Chaos Cultists. Because when we saw that CG trailer, we saw the Skull Crushers of Khorne, a mortal on the Juggernaut of Khorne versus the Blood Crushers of Khorne, which are the Bloodletters on those Juggernauts. So this tells us we'll get mortal units in the Khorne portion of the Chaos Demons for Total War Warhammer 3. So we're probably going to want a base unit. Boom, here you go. Put these Blood Reapers in, let them do their thing. They're just call them Chaos Cultists for the most part. That's all they really are in Blades of Khorne. There's nothing special about these guys. I mean, there is with the actual army rules, but they don't need to be factored into Total War Warhammer 3. Just take the look of these dudes. They all have the really cool cornate crest carved in and scarred onto their chest. They have a really nice aesthetic. And when we shift this forward a little bit, you can see the same thing with Tzeentch. The Alaric Acolytes are just another, hey, these guys are just simply Tzeentch cultists, because Tzeentch is going to need bottom tier, just fodder level units. You could just keep using Chaos Marauders, But that makes the beginning portion of any Chaos Demon campaign just the same. You could even call these guys Tzeentch Chaos Marauders. It doesn't matter. But give them that character that they've established in, unfortunately, Age of Sigmar, which has, I will admit, has gotten better. But the only thing that makes this Age of Sigmar is the fact that it's called Age of Sigmar. This isn't like a brand new culture from Age of Sigmar like the Idoneth Deepkin or the Lumineth Realm Lords or the Sylvaneth. Those things, keep those in Age of Sigmar. Stuff like this just adds character and gives you an actual outlet to explain why, okay, why do the Tzeentch cultists look like this? Well, boom, here we go. That's why they look like it. Here's a nice, cool, awesome approach to it rather than just saying they're Marauders, colored blue, with like blue webs of skin and claws, because that's how they were before, right? If you had Chaos Marauders that had the mark of Tzeentch, you gave them like the like weird looking arms, like little tentacle like arms, and they had like fire breathing on their models. Like they just try to look like horrors and the flamers put together onto a Chaos Marauder. So it was kind of crappy. Or the Slaanesh Marauders, they would have the big pincer hands, the crab pincers. So this gives you character without kind of having everything be this homogenized look with a different color scheme. Even going further, we have the Skull Reapers, which are an Age of Sigmar model, but actually came out in End Times. Another great example of, hey, here's an elite mortal infantry unit that you can use to carve through things, because if you take a look at the Chaos roster, the Chaos Demons roster, it's pretty slim, and it's supposed to be that way. If you're going monogod, then you need to put more stuff into these rosters. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at Bloodletters, you're going to look at the Skull Cannon, the Chariot, the Fleshhounds of Khorne, your Greater Demon, and Scarbrand, and the Skull Taker. Like, that's it. And we'll take a look at the army book in just a little bit, and I'll kind of, I guess, make my point. But having the Skull Reapers as an elite heavy infantry unit that does a lot of AP damage, and maybe anti-large, because there's different variations of these guys. But I think that pulling these guys in is a good call. They're from End Times. They're part of the Scaramore tribe. They have their cool really leader here. I mean, there are some really great things that you can use here. This is Scar Bloodwrath. Like, look at that guy. He almost looks like the Doomseekers from the Storm of Chaos supplement for the dwarfs. I mean, this dude just looks rad. And I don't know why you wouldn't really want him in Total War Warhammer 3 to just represent a different portion of the tribes that were dedicated to Khorne. We'll move here now into a unit that is strictly an Age of Sigmar unit in that it was only created in Age of Sigmar. Zangors are a unit that have been a part of the lore for a considerable amount of time. Chaos Demon lore, Chaos lore, Warhammer Fantasy, they've been there. And they're a unit that was never represented in the 8th edition Chaos Army book. Why not give them, again, a low tier Chaos unit or a Chaos Demon unit that you can use if you don't want to use the Acolytes, or maybe you use these ones alongside the Acolytes, and Acolytes are expendable and these guys are not. I think the Zangors have a really strong place in a Tzeentch roster for the Chaos Demons in Warhammer or Total War Warhammer 3. Moving forward to just another example of things that have changed. This is the Changeling from 8th edition. This is the Changeling from Age of Sigmar. Wow. Like, you can just see that Age of Sigmar really steps up that model game. And not to say that all 8th edition models look terrible, but it's mainly that I don't know when the decision was made to do End Times. If it was like, hey, we'll release 8th edition and then we'll start to end this product line and boot Age of Sigmar up. And this is the time we're going to use to build it out and everything like that. So maybe they said, okay, we're just not going to update these models outside of the ones we've already planned. So a lot of the Chaos Demon models have been the same Chaos Demon models since 6th edition. That's why you see such a drastic change when you look at a lot of these Age of Sigmar models. And they look really good. There's nothing wrong with saying that Age of Sigmar model range and End Times model range looks good, because like I said, End Times in the beginning was really exciting and it turned to crap real fast. And here's another great example. This is the last or the most recent Lord of Change. The 8th edition Lord of Change, 'tis not very cool, I promise. And we'll look when we take a look at the actual army book. So using these things as a source, as we've already clearly seen that they're doing with the CG trailer, not a bad call at all. Now this last one here, a lot of people have called this guy Kugoth Plaguefather, myself included, because I was like, I'm pretty sure that's Kugoth, because Kugoth had a bunch of horns. But I don't remember him having a little tiny top of the morning hat to you, like a weird little bellhop. It's not Kugoth Plaguefather. This is the actual look. Oh, that's Kugoth Plaguefather, sorry. That's what Kugoth Plaguefather looks like in the book. But this dude, the other dude we just looked at, that's Rotigus. This is an Age of Sigmar character. He's got the antlers. He's got the horns. He even has the disgusting tongue thing with the maggots with eyes on it. So I think that they've already kind of made this decision. We're pulling from Age of Sigmar and End Times for the inspiration for our Chaos Daemons because they're updated looks. And again, I think it works. I'm fine with it. I think it needs to actually happen. But I think that it's the only thing in the rosters of what we'll get when Total War Warhammer 3, of what's been announced at least, that can work. And I think, like I said, I love it a lot. So let's take a look now that we've kind of gone over this and talked about it. Let's jump real quick into the 8th edition army book, just so I can show you a couple models that I don't have side-by-sides of, but just to kind of bring my point home. So when we look at the actual roster for 8th edition Chaos Daemons, which remember, added demon units. Some of these units were not in 7th edition, or I guess as early as 7th edition. So the first one here is Bloodthirster. Then we get into the Blood Letters of Khorne, you know, just your standard edition little kind of little demons. Then the Blood Crushers of Khorne, the blood letters on top of the Juggernauts of Khorne. The Flesh Hounds, which we took a look at. And this is probably one of my favorite art styles. This is like a really old throwback art style that they brought back for the 8th edition. It was a really cool touch for the demons. Kind of shows them being this timeless entity within both games. The Skull Cannons of Khorne, again, a new 8th edition convention here, not one that was in 7th. The Blood Throne, that's what it's called, not Skull Chariot or whatever I said. Yeah, the Blood Thrones of Khorne is another 8th edition convention, not one from 7th or prior. Our Skull Taker, which we took a look at, Karanak, our named Flesh Hound, and then Scarbrand. That's it. I mean, of the things we took a look at, 3 of them are named characters. So you're gonna need some way to kind of diversify your roster, and that's why I'm saying, hey, if you're gonna put the mortals in there like the Skull Crushers, why not put in the Skull Reapers? Why not put in those Blood Reapers from, or Reavers actually, I think it was Blood Reavers from Age of Sigmar. Fill out the roster with just some, you know, trash Age of Sigmar bottom tier units that just can get killed as expendable units. And as we take a look here at the actual, just to kind of, hey, this, I swear I wasn't kidding around. That's an 8th edition. Oh, so this was, I got it mixed up. I'm so sorry. I showed you guys both editions, both the 6th and the 8th edition, and this is the 8th edition. The little one with the like the boar head or the bull head was actually the 6th edition one. That's your new Blood Throne. But here it is again. That's the really old Kairos Fate Weaver. That's the old Lord of Change. And it is worth noting though, they did use that model for Sarthoriel, because I do not believe the new Lord of Change had come out yet. I'm not 100% sure. I don't recall. A lot of these old models, like this is the Great Unclean one that came out in 8th edition. He's terrible looking, especially by consideration of the Great Unclean one that was released with Glotkin. And we move down further here. That was a newer model that came out in 7th or 8th. That's the Keeper of Secrets here that we took a look at. That's the one of the most recent Demon Princes. It is a terrible model. Be'lakor looks amazing, but this guy does not. But again, just kind of showing this 8th edition off as not the end-all be-all of the aesthetic of the Chaos Daemons for Total War Warhammer 3. So go ahead and let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you agree with me? Do you think that Chaos Daemons are probably the only faction that's appropriate to pull from Age of Sigmar and End Times because it was the last time they actually got a good update? Then go ahead and let me know in the comments below. But if you think I'm wrong and you think, no, this is what makes the Chaos Daemons, these old kind of chintzy look, that kind of this cheap look that also kind of gives them their charm and their character, go ahead, let me know in the comment section below. Again, I don't think that Creative Assembly should be pulling from Age of Sigmar and End Times far and wide, but there are other units, right? When we take a look at Nagash, I want Nagash's newest model. I want those Morghasts. I want the Mortarks, those newer, better, polished, I don't know, I said sharp was another word I kept using, right? Those models are the ones that I want, and I think they're still a good source to pull from. But you let me know in the comment section below, like I keep saying. Tell me what you think. What do you think is appropriate, or what do you think is inappropriate to pull from, and we'll kind of get a good discussion going here. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one, and take care.